She gave a freezing stranger her son's insulin money, $83. Every bill in her apron pocket pressed into an old woman's hands before she let herself think about it twice. The snow was coming down sideways on Larchmere Boulevard. The buses had quit an hour earlier. And the woman who had pushed through the door of the Belmont Diner at 3 in the morning was soaked to the skin, asking after a bus that had not run in years, staring at the laminated map by the register like it had lied to her. Boone did not weigh it. That was the part the man in the corner booth would turn over in his mind for weeks. She did not do the arithmetic out loud, the way she did the arithmetic for everything else in her life. She took off her own coat and set it on the woman's shoulders. She sat her in the booth by the radiator. She cracked 2 eggs onto a flat top nobody was going to be charged for. And when the woman admitted she had nowhere to go and no way to get there, Des folded the bills into her palm, closed the cold fingers around them, and told her to take a cab, get a room, and stay put until the snow let up. Through the frosted front window, from a booth he had been counting on staying empty, a man in a $9,000 coat watched a line cook kneel down in the slush of a doorway to tie a stranger's wet shoelace. He had come in to be invisible. He was very good at being invisible. But what kept him awake that night was not the $83, and it was not the coat, and it was not the eggs. It was one sentence she said to the woman as she held the door open against the wind. A sentence he was just close enough to hear. A sentence that had traveled a long way to reach that doorway. Farther than he could have guessed. All the way up from Mississippi in the pocket of a dead man's coat. Rewind, 14 hours. Before she knew what the night was going to cost her, the half-double on Hulda Avenue had a furnace that ran when it felt like it, and a back door you had to lift by the handle before it would close. Mount Pleasant, on the east side of Cleveland, a street of double porches and old maples, where most of the houses had been owned outright once, paid off by men who worked the mills in the flats, and where now about every third one stood empty with plywood in the windows and a city notice stapled to the door. The neighborhood had not failed. The neighborhood had been failed, which is a different sentence. And Des could have told you the difference by the time she was 12. She woke at 4:40 in the afternoon, which counted as morning for her, because she worked the shift a schedule called graveyard, and everyone in the kitchen called the ghost shift. 11 at night to 7 in the morning, 5 nights a week. $14.20 an hour at the Belmont Diner over on Larchmere, a 40-minute ride on 2 buses each way. Junie was already at the kitchen table when her mother came out of the bedroom. 9 years old, named for a great-aunt down in Greenville she had never met. She had a spiral notebook open and a second-hand glucose meter beside it, and she was writing a number into a column she had drawn herself. With a ruler, because the columns the clinic printed were too narrow for her handwriting. 1:42. She had checked her little brother's blood sugar before she had checked whether there was anything in the house for her own lunch. Des looked at the number. She looked at the notebook. 3 weeks of numbers in a child's careful hand, every reading logged, every meal timed, a column near the back titled in block letters that said bad signs, copied word for word out of the clinic pamphlet. She looked at her daughter, who had built a whole system out of a ruler and a drugstore meter because the alternative was asking for help from a mother who had run out of help to give. She did not say anything about it. Some things you do not name out loud, because naming them makes the child feel caught instead of thanked. She kissed the top of Junie's head, smelled the coconut oil she had worked through her braids the night before, and started the rice. Theo was on the floor of the front room, 6 years old, diagnosed at 4, the kind of diagnosis that does not go away and does not get cheaper. Type 1. His body made no insulin of its own and never would, and so every meal in that house was a calculation. Count the carbohydrates, draw the units, watch the clock. He sat sorting bottle caps out of a purple Crown Royal bag, lining them up by color along the baseboard, which is what he did when his sugar ran low and his words went soft at the edges. When he was happy, he hummed. He hummed the way other children narrate, a running tune under everything, and the whole house had learned to read him by it. Humming meant good. Quiet meant check him. Des crouched, pricked his finger gentle as she could, read the meter, and reached for the insulin pen on top of the refrigerator. There was not much left in it. There had not been much left in it for 9 days. She had been stretching him, smaller plates so he would need fewer units, an earlier bedtime so the long stretch of sleep would carry him through unless. You are not supposed to do that with a child, She knew exactly what you were supposed to do. The pharmacy had told her the refill needed something called prior authorization, and that prior authorization took 7 to 10 business days, and a body that makes no insulin does not run on business days. She dialed the dose she had decided on, not the dose the chart wanted, and gave it to him in the soft place at the back of his arm, and he leaned into her shoulder and hummed 2 notes, and went back to his bottle caps. Above the pen, "Take to the freezer door," with a strip of masking tape gone yellow at the edges, hung the only thing she had left of her father, not a photograph. A brass harmonica, dented on one corner, the letters E and B scratched into the side by a boy's hand a long time ago. You have to go back 75 years to understand what that harmonica was doing on a refrigerator in Mount Pleasant. Booker Boone rode north out of Greenville, Mississippi in 1951, 19 years old, with one cardboard suitcase and his father's harmonica in his coat pocket. He was one face in the great river of black families flowing up out of the South in those years, toward the mills and the foundries and the promise that a man could be paid for his work without tipping his hat for the privilege. He went where the heat was, the open hearth at the steelworks down in the flats, 29 years of it, fire on one side of him and Lake Erie cold on the other. He bought the house on Holda Avenue with cash he kept in a coffee can because the banks of that era had drawn a red line around his neighborhood and decided his money was not money. He was one of the first black families on that block. Within 10 years, the way it went in Cleveland, the block was all black families, because everyone else had been loaned the means to leave, and no one on Holda had been loaned the means to follow. His son Elam was born in the back bedroom of that house in 1955 and scratched his initials into his grandfather's harmonica when he was 8, for which he caught a whipping, and which made the harmonica his forever. Elam ran a cutting torch at the works for 19 years. When the mill finally closed for good in 2001, he came home, set his helmet on the porch rail, and never said one word out loud about what had been taken from him. What he did instead was sit on the back step every evening and play. Low and slow, old Delta stuff his father had carried north, music made by people who had learned to put their grief somewhere it could breathe without asking anybody's permission. Des grew up falling asleep to it through the window screen, and on Saturday mornings, in the years after the mill closed, Elam Boone fed people. It started with 2 men from the cutting crew who had nowhere to be on a Saturday and ended, within a year, as a standing thing, a folding table in the backyard, grits, eggs, whatever the garden gave up, coffee in a dented percolator. Laid-off men came, and then men who had never had a job to be laid off from, and then anybody the street sent over. Elam never asked a single one of them a single question. Des was 9 years old, carrying plates out the back door. When she finally asked him why he fed people, they did not even know when their own table ran thin half the winter. Her father looked at her over the percolator and said the sentence she would carry the rest of her life. A full plate doesn't ask for a name. That was the whole sermon. He never explained it and never repeated himself in the moment because he did not have to. It lived in the grits and the folding table and the way he stood at the gate Saturday mornings watching the street like a man expecting company. He kept one other piece of teaching for her, and he did it in the aisle of the Dave's supermarket up on Kinsman when she was 9. She found a $10 bill on the floor between the cereal and the cold case, and she picked it up and looked at her father with the face of a child who has just learned the ground sometimes pays out like a slot machine. Elam did not lecture. He walked her the length of the store to the courtesy counter and stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, while she reached up and handed it over to a clerk who plainly thought they were both wasting his afternoon. Elam did not care what the clerk's face did. He cared what his daughter's hands did. On the way home, he bought her a frozen Coke from the machine outside, because doing right was supposed to taste like something. His heart quit at 59, on a Tuesday in January, while he was shoveling somebody else's walk. Because of course it was somebody else's walk. Her mother outlived him by 2 years, and the manner of it was a thing Des still could not stand fully inside of. For Boone pressed sheets on the steam line of a hospital laundry off Euclid Avenue for 22 years, 8 hours a day in heat that curled the paint, and came home with hands so warm her children fought over which one she would lay on the backs of their necks in winter. The diabetes came in her 50s. The slow kind. The grown-up kind. The kind the doctor said could be managed. And it was managed, while Elam was alive and the 2 checks covered the premiums. After he died, The survivor pension did not carry the insurance the same way, and Verla did the math at her own kitchen table, alone, and told no one because telling someone was asking, and asking was a door her whole generation had learned opened onto rooms with clipboards. She made each pen last twice as long as it was meant to. Des found the dates written small on the labels afterward. The stroke took her on a Sunday morning while she was pinning her hair for service. She was 61. She died 3 months before Junie was born, which meant she never laid one of those warm hands on either of her grandchildren, and Des had been doing the same arithmetic her mother died of, in the same city 1 generation later, with a 6-year-old. So when Des Boone counted the units left in her son's pen, she was standing in 2 kitchens at once. Hers, and a kitchen on Hulda Avenue where a woman she loved had quietly decided her own life cost too much. She knew exactly where this road went. She had buried the proof. The neighborhood knew her, the way the East Side knows its own. Greater Calvary Baptist, the brick church up on Kinsman, where she had been christened and married off exactly nobody, still claimed her whether she made service or not. Sister Pearline Watts, who ran the kitchen committee like a head of state, still sent a plate home with Junie every time the child crossed her path, wrapped in foil with the corners folded sharp as an envelope. None of it was charity, and nobody called it that. It was just the way the street breathed. And there was Mr. Otha Green. Otha lived in the downstairs half of the double, 73 years old, a widower, retired off the regional transit after 31 years driving the number 14 bus up and down Kinsman. He claimed he had hauled half the east side to work and the other half home, and it was probably close to true. He knew every child on the block by name and every parent by their business. 5 nights a week, at 10:15, Des knocked twice on his door, and Otha opened it in his cardigan with the elbow worn through and waved her off before she could start in on the thank you-us. "Go on," he said. "That night like every night. I am here when you leave. I am here when you come back. The boy and the girl are with me, and we are going to wash the weather and disrespect the Cavaliers and go to bed on time. Go make the money." Then he looked at her 1 beat longer than he needed to, the way he did sometimes. A man who had spent 3 decades watching faces in a long mirror above a windshield and could read exhaustion at 40 feet. "You carry it all by yourself, Odessa," he said. "One day that is going to cost you something." She did not argue. She did not cry. She did not let him see her face change. She told him there was rice on the stove and a plate from Sister Pearline in the icebox, and she went down the steps into the first of the snow with $83 folded in the pocket of her apron. 3 weeks of doubles she had not logged, 3 weeks of eating off the chipped plates that could not go out to customers. The copay, finally whole for the next vial. She had built that fold of bills the way her grandfather built a house, slow and in cash, and she did not know it would be gone before the sun came up. She also did not know that on the other side of the city, in a house with a name instead of an address, a man was awake too, reading a dead woman's handwriting and feeling nothing, which had lately begun to frighten him. Here is a fact about the country Des Boone was carrying her son through. A vial of the fast-acting insulin a child like Theo depends on can carry a list price north of $300, and a body that makes none of its own does not negotiate. When the money runs short, parents do the only thing the math allows. They cut the doses, they count units like coins, and they pray the numbers hold until the next paycheck. It is not neglect. It is a working mother with a job and insurance and a child she would die for, standing at a refrigerator at 10 o'clock at night, doing subtraction her own mother died of. 19 minutes away by car, behind a gate in Shaker Heights, Gideon Thorne had never once gone without a thing he wanted, and he was awake anyway. He was 61 years old and worth a number he had stopped saying out loud, because past a certain point, the number stops meaning anything except that it exists. He owned Thorne Hospitality Group, 340 diners and grills across 6 states, the kind of places where a trucker and a surgeon eat the same eggs at the same counter at the same hour, and the coffee refills itself until you surrender. He had started inside one. 15 years old, washing dishes at a counter joint in Youngstown, learning the only lesson that ever mattered to him afterward, which is that a restaurant is not food and it is not real estate. It is a lit window at 3 in the morning. It is the unspoken promise that when the rest of the world has gone dark and locked its doors, somebody will still be standing there with the grill hot, and you can come in out of it, whatever your particular it happens to be. He had the estate now, 11,000 square feet of stone behind an iron gate. He had the Gulfstream that made Cleveland and Charleston an hour apart. He had the Patek Philippe he never looked at because he already knew what time it was. The Bentley a driver kept warm in a heated garage. A standing table at per se the 2 times a year business dragged him through Manhattan. He had a daughter with a Wharton degree running operations down the hall from him, and a dead wife he had grieved properly years ago, and a dead mother he had not grieved at all, because grieving her would have required admitting what he had done to her, and what he had done to her was nothing. Years and years of carefully administered nothing. Ruth Thorne worked the overnight shift at a diner in Youngstown for 40 years, the same 40 years her son spent climbing out of it. She called every trucker on the route by his first name and knew which ones were lying about their wives. She kept a pot going for the men who came off the night freight with nothing, and she fed them at the back counter and never wrote a ticket for it, and when the owner squawked she told him to take it out of her legendary tips. She had hands that smelled like coffee and bleach and she never once apologized for them. When the money came, Gideon was ashamed of her. He could say that now, alone, at night, in a house she had refused to move into. Ashamed of the uniform. Ashamed of the hours. Ashamed of the way she would not quit. Not when he bought her a condominium she would not live in. Not when he sent checks she folded into a drawer and mostly never cashed. He stopped visiting and told himself he was busy, and he was busy. And that is the most dangerous alibi there is, because it is always true. She died 5 years ago, on a night he was 40 minutes away by air, and he had not known she was sick because Ruth Thorne had never in her life told anyone anything that might sound like asking. After the funeral, going through the rented room she had lived in like a woman keeping a bus seat warm, he found one thing addressed to him. A guest check, a green order ticket from the diner, soft as cloth from writing in her apron, with one line on the back in her slanting hand. The ones worth knowing are the ones who do right when the till's empty and nobody's looking. He kept it in the top drawer of a desk on the 30th floor of a building on Public Square, and he read it most mornings, and it had become what rituals become when the understanding goes out of them, a habit. A sentence he could recite and no longer hear. A thing you only read stops being a thing you believe. But it had done one thing to him, that ticket. Once a month, telling no one, he put on an ordinary coat from the back of the closet and had the driver drop him 2 blocks away, and he walked into one of his own 340 diners, at an indecent hour and sat in the corner and ordered coffee like nobody. He did not trust the reports. The reports were clean. The reports were always clean. What the reports could not tell him was what a room felt like in the dead hours. Whether the night cook wiped the counter when no customer was looking. Whether the lit window at 3 in the morning still meant what he had built it to mean. He had learned expensively and late that people perform decency whenever they believe it is being measured, and that the only honest version of a person is the one that shows up when the till is empty and nobody is keeping score. He just had never managed to apply the lesson anywhere it could hurt him. That particular week, the lesson was sitting on his desk wearing a red flag. His daughter Whitney, 34, sharp as a new blade and exactly as warm, had sent up a proposal with one tab marked urgent. The overnight shift. The ghost shift. The numbers said it did not earn its keep, cut the hours past midnight at the weaker stores, thin the staffing, trim the benefits the night crews barely used anyway. She was not cruel. She had simply never stood in one of those kitchens at 3 in the morning, and to her the ghost shift was a row on a spreadsheet. And a row on a spreadsheet does not have a 9-year-old at home reading a glucose meter. Gideon had not signed it. He could not have told you why. He told his driver instead to take him out to the store on Larchmere, the one the report said was running fine, and he sat down in a corner booth at 2:45 in an ordinary coat with a black coffee, expecting to confirm what he already knew and go home to a house that echoed, "If you think this is a story about a rich man who rescues a poor woman, stay with me because it is not." What he was about to watch through a frosted window would not make him reach for his checkbook. It would take everything he believed about why people are good and turn it over in his hands like a stone he had been carrying for 30 years without once looking at the underside. The blizzard night, the way it actually happened, from the inside, went like this. Desk came on at 11. By 1 in the morning, the snow had narrowed Larchmere down to a single set of tire tracks, and the wind off the lake was doing the thing it does in January, coming in sideways like it had a grudge. By 2, the Belmont was down to a trucker nursing decaf at the counter, and the man in the corner she had pegged for a salesman waiting out the storm. Good coat. Quiet. Tipped on the first cup before she had earned it, which usually meant lonely or meant trouble, and a woman who had grown up where she grew up had learned to keep half an eye on both. The old woman came in at 20 to 3. She came in the way the cold comes in, all at once and helpless about it. A small black woman somewhere north of 80, in a coat soaked through to the lining, no hat, no gloves, asking after the number 9 bus. She asked after it the way you ask after a person. The number 9 had not run past midnight in 6 years, and the look on her face when Reyes told her so was not anger. It was a navigation system recalculating and finding nothing. She had been visiting a niece, she said. She had gotten turned around. The niece's phone went to a voicemail box that was full. Des did the things she did, in the order she always did them, with no more ceremony than wiping down a table, the coat off her own back and onto the woman's shoulders. The booth by the radiator. 2 eggs and toast onto the flat top, no ticket written. She crouched at the edge of the booth while the woman ate, and got her talking, and learned her name was Miss Geneva, and watched the shaking in the old hand slow down by degrees the way it does when warmth and food and somebody's full attention land on a body all at the same time. There is no shelter bed in this city you can conjure at 3 in the morning in a blizzard for a confused elderly woman, and Des knew better than to spend an hour proving it. There was a motel 4 blocks down. There was a cab company that still answered. The fare and the room together came to a number she did not have to calculate, because she had been carrying that exact number folded in her apron for 3 weeks. She did not stand there weighing it. That was the part the man in the corner could not get over then or after. He had sat across boardroom tables from people deciding the fates of 10,000 strangers with less on the line for themselves personally, and he had watched every one of them perform the weighing, the long pause, the steepled fingers, the careful tasting of the decision. The cook in the apron did not weigh. She turned her back to the room, the way you do in a kitchen when you are counting your tips, and she came back with the whole fold of bills and pressed it into Miss Geneva's hands and closed the old fingers around it like she was sealing an envelope. Reyes called the cab. The eggs got finished, and at the door, with the snow blowing in around the both of them, Miss Geneva caught Des by the wrist with surprising strength and asked her the question strangers always ask, the one that has no good answer. Why? You don't know me, baby. Why would you do all this? And Des told her the thing her father used to say over a percolator in a backyard on Holda Avenue, the thing his father had carried up from Greenville in a coat pocket. She did not reach for it. It came out the way breathing comes out because it had stopped being a sentence years ago and become the plain shape of how she moved through a room. A full plate doesn't ask for a name. The cab pulled away into the white. Des stood in the doorway a moment, with her arms bare in the cold, and then she went back inside and scraped the grill, because the grill did not care what had just happened. She did not know the man in the corner had heard every word. She got home at 7:20. Otha had the kids fed and the weather disrespected. She slept 4 hours that felt like 40 minutes, and when she woke in the gray of the afternoon and reached for the pen on top of the refrigerator, the $83 was a cab fare and a motel room across town in a stranger's pocket. She did not regret it. It did not matter that she did not regret it. The math had not changed, and the math did not care how she felt. She counted the units. 40 left. Maybe 36, the way the pen was dragging. 2 days if she cut him, 1 if she was honest. The pharmacy said 7 to 10 business days. The math did not close. She ran it again standing up and again sitting down, and it did not close either way. She called the pharmacy at 4. A young man read her the script in the voice of a person who has said the word pending 900 times and stopped hearing it. The authorization was with the insurance company. There was nothing to expedite. He could see in the system that it was pending. She asked, keeping her voice in the place she kept it, what 1 vial cost if she just paid for it. He told her. She held the phone and looked at a checking account holding $19 and change, and the silence went on long enough that he said, "Hello, ma'am," twice. He said he was sorry. He sounded like he meant it, as much as a script lets you mean anything. He was not a cruel man. He was a man at a counter doing exactly what the counter told him to do, and somewhere far above him a system had decided that a 6-year-old's pancreas should keep banker's hours. So she did the thing she had sworn on her mother's grave she would never do. She took the harmonica down off the refrigerator. She wrapped it in a clean dish towel like it was something that could feel cold. And she walked it 11 blocks up to the pawn shop on Buckeye, the one with the folding gate across the window and a glass case inside, full of wedding rings and power drills. Every item in it the end of a story, exactly like the one she was standing in. The man behind the counter was not unkind. He was a scale. He turned the harmonica over twice under the light, found the scratched initials, pressed 2 notes out of it that hung in the dusty air like they were embarrassed to be there, and set it down on the glass. $15, he said. $15. A migration. 29 years of open hearth and 19 years of cutting torch. 2 men's worth of porch winters. A coffee can full of house money the banks would not touch. A backyard full of fed strangers. All of it weighed on a pawnbroker's palm and called $15. And here was the joke, underneath the joke. Even if she said yes, even if she slid the last of her father across that counter, $15 would not buy 1/20th of a vial. She could sell the whole inheritance of the Boones, and it would not move the needle 1 unit. She picked it up. She wrapped it back in the towel. She walked the 11 blocks home with it pressed under her, arm like a rib that had come loose. She did not cry on Buckeye. She did not cry on her own porch. She did not let Junie see anything on her face but tired, which was true enough to pass. She taped the harmonica back on the freezer door. She cut Theo's dinner dose. She told herself one more night. People in her position tell themselves one more night every night, and most nights they are right, and the arithmetic of most nights is the most dangerous arithmetic there is. It was Junie who caught it. 2 in the morning. Des at the Belmont, elbow deep in the rush that never came. In the back bedroom on Hulda Avenue, a 9-year-old woke up for no reason she could have named, except that she had been sleeping with one ear on her brother for 2 years the way mothers sleep, and the sound of the room had changed. Theo was breathing wrong, fast and deep, again and again, like he was trying to pour something out of himself that would not pour. She turned on the lamp. His lips were dry. He did not want to wake up all the way. She got the meter, and her hands were steady, because she had practiced this in her head the way other kids practice free throws, and she pricked his finger, and the meter did not show a number at all. It showed 2 letters. It showed the letters that mean the number is too high for the machine to say. Then she smelled it. Faint and sweet and wrong, like fruit going over. The smell the pamphlet had a clinical word for, and Junie's notebook just called the smell, underlined twice in the bad signs column. She did not panic and she did not freeze. She called 911 first, because the notebook said call first, and she answered the dispatcher's questions in complete sentences. Age 6, type 1. Blood sugar too high to read, breathing fast. The smell, yes ma'am, the door will be unlocked. Then she ran down and pounded on Arthur's door with the flat of both hands, and the old man came up the stairs faster than a 73-year-old has any business moving, and he held Theo's purple bag of bottle caps and said his name to him low and steady, the same voice he had used for 31 years to tell a rolling busload of strangers that everything was under control. The paramedic who came through the door 8 minutes later was a compact woman with her hair under a knit cap, and on any other morning Des could have told you her order without asking. Priya, 2 eggs over hard wheat toast, no butter, tipped in quarters because quarters were what the day gave her. She ate at the Belmont counter most mornings coming off shift. She did not know yet whose child this was. She knew that a 6-year-old in early diabetic ketoacidosis was looking up at her from the bed, and that the 9-year-old beside him was reciting numbers and times out of a spiral notebook like a charge nurse giving report. Dinner at 6, units given, readings at 8 and 10 and midnight, all of it in order. You did everything right, Priya told her, and meant it all the way down, and got the boy on the gurney. Otha rode in the front of the ambulance because nobody had the heart to tell him no. From the kitchen, with the lights going red and blue across Sister Caroline's foil-wrapped plate on the counter, he called the Belmont. Reyes picked up, and Reyes walked back through the swinging door into the kitchen, where Des was scraping a flat top for a rush of exactly no one, and he had taken 2 phone calls like this in his life and never gotten better at it, and he said the 4 words that stop a heart. It's Theo. They called. The bus does not run fast enough for a night like that, and the Belmont's dishwasher threw her the keys to his Buick without being asked, and she drove east on streets the plows had given up on, both hands on the wheel, doing the thing she had done at every catastrophe of her life, which was getting very quiet and very precise while something behind her sternum screamed in a register only she could hear. She did not pray words. She prayed her mother's name and her father's name and one sentence over and over that was not addressed to anybody in particular. Not him too. Not him too. Not him too. Not him too. The hospital stabilized him by morning, fluids in one line, insulin in another. A room that beeped in 3 pitches Theo would later hum back to the nurses until half the floor was calling him maestro. A resident with kind eyes and a tired mouth used the word close and let it sit there in the room and did not dress it up. And Des stood very still and received it the way you receive weather. A social worker named Carmen found her in the hallway on the second day with a folder 3 inches thick and a pen that worked. There were manufacturer assistance programs, she said. There was paperwork that, filled out correctly and notarized and submitted, would put insulin in this family's refrigerator at little or no cost, and would have done so at any point in the past 2 years if anyone in the chain of clinics and pharmacies and insurance phone trees had thought to lead with that instead of with pending. By Thursday, there were 3 vials in a paper bag in Des's hands. She thanked Carmen in a voice scraped down to the studs, and she did not say the thing she was thinking, which was that her son had nearly died of a technicality, of a waiting period, of the distance between a body's clock and a billing department's calendar. Her mother had died of that distance in full, by inches, over 2 years. Her son had been pulled back from the same edge by a 9-year-old with a spiral notebook, and then the neighborhood did what the neighborhood does. Nobody organized it. Nobody had to. By the second day, plates were arriving at the hospital with Atha, foil corners folded sharp, and Sister Perlane had put Theo's name before the congregation at Wednesday prayer without being asked, and a woman Des barely knew from 3 doors down had simply taken her laundry off the porch and brought it back folded. In the neighborhoods Des came from, there has always been a second system running underneath the official one. It does not have eligibility requirements. Its caseworkers are retired bus drivers and church mothers. Its currency is plates and rides and watched children, and it was built by people who learned over generations that the front door systems were not coming for them. So the back doors had better stay oiled. It is not a safety net. It is closer to a body deciding, cell by cell, that one of its own will not be allowed to fall. It cannot conjure $300 of refrigerated medicine. That was the part that put the ice in Des's chest at 2 in the morning. Love could carry casseroles up 3 flights of stairs all winter. Love could not manufacture insulin. She went back to work 2 nights later because 2 nights was every night she could afford to miss, and because the Belmont's owner, whoever that was, some name on a paycheck stub, was not in the business of paid emergencies for ghost shift cooks. She taped Theo's hospital bracelet to the freezer door under the harmonica because the refrigerator was where this family kept its proof. Then she put on her apron and went and stood at the bus stop in the dark. The quiet man in the good coat was there again that night. He had been there every night since the blizzard. She had not put it together because a graveyard cook does not keep a guest list, but Reyes had. The man came in around 2. Same corner booth. Black coffee. The 3rd night he had asked through Reyes whether the kitchen could do a hot beef and gravy over white toast, the kind they used to make in Youngstown, soft enough for a person with no teeth left to argue with. Des made it without comment. She did not know she was cooking a dead woman back to life 1 plate at a time, or that the man in the corner ate it slowly, with his eyes closed on the first bite, every single night, like a man taking medicine. He tipped $40 on an $11 check. He left it folded under the saucer and was gone before she bust the table. He did it again the next night. The 3rd time she carried the 2 20s out to the booth and set them down in front of him and told him, politely and with the door of her voice closed, that the kitchen appreciated it but he had made some kind of mistake. "It's not a mistake," he said. "It's the best plate of food in this city." "It's an $11 plate of food," she said, and walked away, and did not take the 20s, and he did not stop leaving them. Understand what she was looking at from inside her own life. A wealthy white man, appearing nightly, watching her work, asking questions about her through her manager. Leaving money she had not earned folded under china. Des Boone had been raised on the east side of Cleveland by people who had taught her with receipts exactly how many different kinds of trouble can wear a good coat, and not one of the lessons had been soft. She did not assume the worst of him. She assumed nothing, which is harder, and she watched him the way you watch weather coming in off the lake, and she kept the counter between them. What she could not see was the wreckage on the other side of the booth. Gideon Thorne had asked Reyes about her, finally, on the 5th night, in the parking lot, in the tone a man uses when the answer matters, and Reyes, who would have stonewalled the process server without blinking, found himself answering, because the question did not sound like ammunition. 2 years on the ghost shift. Never late, never calls off. Covered 3 shifts last month for a fry cook with a sick mother and never put in for the overtime. Single mom, 2 kids. The little one has the expensive kind of sick. He was in the hospital last week. You probably noticed she was out. And then Rhea said the thing that finished it. She'd give you the coat off her back, and then he stopped, because he remembered, standing in that cold parking lot, that he had watched her do exactly that through the front window in a blizzard, while a man in a good coat sat in the corner pretending to read the menu. Gideon went home through the iron gate into the 11,000 square feet of stone and echo. And he did not sleep. He took the green order ticket out of the drawer he had moved it to by his bed, and he read his mother's slanting hand for the 1,000th time. And for the first time in 5 years the sentence had a pulse. The ones worth knowing are the ones who do right when the till's empty and nobody's looking. He had built a fortune on lit windows at 3 in the morning, and somewhere in the building of it he had stopped being able to see the people standing in the light. His mother had been one of them. She had died being one of them, 40 minutes away by air, without telling him she was sick, because asking was a door she would not walk through. And 6 nights ago, through a frosted window, he had watched a woman his company paid $14.20 an hour give away what he now understood had been her child's medicine money to a stranger in a storm with nobody watching, and answer the question why with a sentence that could have been carved on Ruth Thorne's headstone. In the morning he walked into Whitney's office without an appointment and laid her proposal on the desk. The one with the red tab, the one that thinned the ghost shift, and he asked her a question with no spreadsheet in it. He asked her to tell him the first name of one person, any person, who worked overnight at any of their 340 stores. One name. Whitney looked at him for a long moment. She was not cruel, his daughter. She was something more common and more correctable. She was unacquainted. She had audited every line of the night operation and never once stood inside it. And she could not produce a single name, and to her credit she did not invent one. Neither could I have, Gideon said, before the silence got expensive. For 30 years. That's not your failure, it's mine, and you inherited it. But we are not signing this. We are going to do something else, and I don't know what it is yet, and that is going to have to be all right for a few weeks. He did not tell her about the diner on Larchmere. Some things a man has to carry alone until they are ready. If you have ever been the one holding everything together while the world looks straight through you, the next part of this story is for you, and I want you to stay with me, because the night the quiet man finally said his name, he did not hand Des Boone a single thing. He asked her for something. And it would end up changing a great deal more than one kitchen. He came in on a Tuesday at 2:15 in the morning. The diner was empty. The snow had given way to the flat black cold that follows it. When she brought the coffee, he asked her, quietly, if she would sit down for 1 minute. Just one. She did not sit. 2 years of nights had taught her that the people who ask you to sit are usually about to take something, and a lifetime before that had taught her who usually does the taking. She stood with the pot in one hand and the harmonica riding in her apron pocket where it had ridden since the pawn shop, and she said she had a flat top to scrape. He said his name was Gideon Thorne. It did not land at first. It was just a name. 2 words, a salesman's name, and then her eye went past him to the laminated card by the register, the one with the corporate logo she had stopped seeing 2 years ago, the way you stopped seeing your own front door, and the logo said Thorne in plain block letters. The same letters that were printed across the top of the paycheck stub that came every 2 weeks for $14.20 an hour, and the floor tilted half a degree under her shoes. Thorne Hospitality. The name on her apron strings. The name on 340 lit windows across 6 states. The name signed, by a machine, at the bottom of 2 years of her life. She had worked for this man for over 700 nights. She had never known his name. He had never known hers. They had been standing at opposite ends of the same sentence for 2 years, and neither one of them had ever turned around. You were here, she said. It was not a question. The night with the snow, the corner booth. I was, you saw. I heard you too. And then he said it back to her. The thing her father used to say over the percolator, the thing his father carried up out of Greenville in a coat pocket. The thing she had said on a threshold in a blizzard to a confused old woman who could give her nothing back. A full plate doesn't ask for a name. Hearing it in his mouth, in this man's mouth in this booth, was like being seen naked in a room she had been certain was empty. and her hand went flat on the table to steady something that was not the table. There is a name for people like Des in the reports that men like Gideon, Commission, and Skim. The researchers call them Alice. Asset limited, income constrained, employed. Not the jobless, not the homeless, but the tens of millions who work full weeks at real jobs with real insurance and still live one emergency from the edge, who do every single thing the instructions said to do and still end up in a kitchen at midnight counting units of insulin like coins. She was not a crack the system had let her slip through. She was a load-bearing wall the system had been built on top of, and the man in the booth had spent 30 years building exactly such systems, and had needed a blizzard and a dead mother's handwriting to finally look down at the foundation. "Your son," he said. "He was in the hospital. Is he all right?" She did not ask how he knew. A man with his name on the building can know anything he decides to know, and the realization of that ran cold down her arms, and she let it show, because she was done arranging her face for people who held doors. "If this is about the money I gave Mr. Neva," she said, "it was not your money. It came out of my pocket. Whatever you think you saw, I don't owe this company anything, and I don't owe you an explanation for what I do with my own $83. I know whose pocket it came out of," he said. "That is the entire problem. That is what I have not slept over." He looked at her then in a way nobody had looked at her in a long time. Not down, the way the city looked at her. Not through, the way the systems looked at her. Level. The way you look at someone when you have finally, at unforgivable expense, decided to actually see them. "You gave away the last of your child's medicine to a stranger, in a storm," he said, "when no one was watching. You did not know I existed. There was nothing to perform and no one to perform it for. I have been rich for 30 years, and I have sat across from every kind of person money attracts, and I am telling you I have never once seen anybody do what you did. Except one woman, and I let her die without ever telling her I had noticed." He reached into his coat. She braced for the checkbook. She had the refusal loaded and ready, had been carrying it loaded since she was 9 years old, at a courtesy counter on Kinsman with her father's hand on her shoulder. The words were already in her mouth. But what he set down on the table was not a check. What he set down was a slip of green paper, soft as cloth, creased white down the middle from years of opening. A guest check, from a diner that had closed before either of her children was born. There was writing on the back in the slanting hand that was not his. "My mother wrote that," he said. "Her name was Ruth. She worked the overnight shift at a counter joint in Youngstown for 40 years. She is the reason I asked her manager if the kitchen could do hot beef and gravy over white toast, because that was her plate. That was the thing she made for the men who came off the night freight, with nothing in their pockets, and she never wrote a ticket for one of them, not once in 40 years. You have been making it better than I remembered it. I have had to leave some nights before you came out of the kitchen, because I could not be seen eating it the way I was eating it." Des did not touch the ticket. She read it where it lay. The ones worth knowing are the ones who do right when the till's empty and nobody's looking. When the money came, I was ashamed of her, he said. He said it flat and level, the way a man says the thing he has spent years practicing never to say. The uniform. The hours. The way she knew every trucker by his first name and would not quit. Not when I bought her a condominium she refused to live in. Not when I sent checks she folded into a drawer and did not cash. I stopped visiting and told myself I was busy. I was busy. That is the most dangerous alibi in the world because it is always true. She died 5 years ago, on a night I was 40 minutes away by air, and I did not know she was sick, because she had never in her life said anything to me that might sound like asking. I have read that sentence on the back of that ticket every morning since the funeral, and I want you to understand what I finally understood this week, watching you. I always thought she was telling me how to judge other people. She was not. She was describing the till. I was the till, Miss Boone. I was the empty register she did right beside for 40 years while nobody who mattered was looking. You told that old woman a full plate doesn't ask for a name. I have spent 30 years asking for names before I fed anybody anything. References. Credit histories. Collateral. My own mother could not have gotten a loan from me. The diner hummed. The flat top ticked as it cooled. Somewhere back in the kitchen the dish machine sighed through its cycle, and neither of them moved. Then he did the only thing he knew how to do with the size of what he was feeling, because he was still a man with one fluent language, and the language was provision. He would clear the hospital bill, every cent of it, tonight. He would move Theo onto the company's executive medical plan, the one the board wrote on. No caps, no waiting lists, no prior authorizations, for life. And he would write a number right now, at this table. That would mean she never again stood in a kitchen at midnight counting units, never again carried anything 11 blocks to a pawn shop, never again learned what the inside of an ambulance sounds like with her own child in it. And Boone, who had been rehearsing this refusal her whole life without knowing what she was rehearsing it for, set the coffee pot down on the table and gave it to him standing up. I don't take what I didn't earn. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. My father walked me the length of the Daves up on Kinsman when I was 9 years old, she said, to hand a $10 bill I found on the floor back to a courtesy clerk who could not have cared less. He didn't lecture me. He just stood there with his hand on my shoulder while my hands did it. Because he wasn't raising a girl who got lucky, he was raising a woman who could be trusted in a room full of unattended money. Then he bought me a frozen Coke, because doing right was supposed to taste like something. That man fed half of Holda Avenue out of his backyard on a laid-off steelworker's nothing, and he is in Calvary Cemetery right now. And if I take your check, I have to go explain it to him eventually. I am not going to do that. She reached into her apron and took out the harmonica, the dented brass, the scratched initials, and she set it down on the table beside his mother's green ticket. 2 relics. 2 dead parents who had fed strangers off thin tables, lying side by side on Formica at 2:30 in the morning. 9 days ago I carried this to the pawn shop on Buckeye to keep my son alive, she said. My great-grandfather's harmonica, that came up from Mississippi in 1951 in my grandfather's coat pocket. The man offered me $15, and I picked it back up and I carried it home, with my boy down to his last 40 units, because some things you do not sell even when the not selling might kill you. So hear me when I tell you this. I am not selling you my story for a number either. A check makes me a thing that happened to you, Mr. Thorne. A thing you fixed on your way through. I am not a thing that happened to you. Then what do you want, he said. It was not a challenge and it was not a negotiation. It was a man asking the realest question he had asked in 5 years, maybe longer. I want you to do something with all of that guilt that is worth more than my one kitchen. She looked at him level, the counter still between them, her people's whole history of weighing such men standing quietly at her back, somewhere in one of your 340 diners, right now, tonight. There is another mother on the ghost shift doing the math I just did. Pick between the rent and the medicine. Pick between the shift and the sick child. Decide which night she can afford for her boy's pancreas to take off. You did not put her there, but your spreadsheets keep her there, and your daughter's red tab was about to make it worse. So don't write me a check. Build the thing that would have caught me. Build the thing that would have caught your mother. Then maybe I will have earned standing in a room with you, and you will have earned that ticket in your pocket. Not before. He looked at the harmonica beside his mother's handwriting for a long time. The 2 objects sat there with their combined worth of about $18, and their combined weight of about 4 generations. And a man who could buy the block they were sitting on could not touch either one. I am going to need help building it, he said finally. From somebody who has actually worked the shift. I cannot see it from 30 floors up. I have proven that for 30 years. It was not a check, it was a job, and it was an earned one. And she heard the difference the way you hear the difference between someone handing you something and someone asking you for something. She did not say yes that night. She told him she would think about it, and she picked up the harmonica and put it back in her apron, and she went and scraped the flat top, because the flat top did not care whose name was on the building. Gideon Thorne sat in the booth a while longer with his mother's ticket. Then he folded it away, left the exact total of the check on the table, and not a dollar more, and walked out into the cold. And for the first time in 30 years, he did not call for the car. He walked. Past the lit window. Down Larchmere in the dark, in the good coat, on foot, like a man who had finally remembered what the lit windows were for. She said yes on a Sunday. Not to him. To Junie. She had been doing the math out loud at the kitchen table again. The childcare hours against the training hours against the bus schedule. When her daughter looked up from her homework and said, in the tone of a person settling a long argument, Mom, you already do the job, you just don't get paid for it. 9 years old. Sister Pierline always said that child had been here before. They called it Ruth's table. It was not a press release, although a press release happened eventually, and Gideon scowled through every minute of it. It was a thing bolted into the bones of the company, in exactly the places Whitney's red tab had wanted to cut. overnight childcare, paid for, arranged with licensed providers and vetted neighbors within a mile of every store that ran a ghost shift. An emergency fund that paid a medical copay within 24 hours of the ask, because a body does not run on business days, and now there was one company in America where somebody at the top had that sentence tattooed on the inside of his skull, paid emergency leave, that did not have to be begged for, or explained, or earned back in covered shifts. And all of it printed, not in a benefits binder the thickness of a phone book and type the size of an apology, but on a single laminated card screwed to the wall beside the time clock in every store, in letters big enough to read at 3 in the morning with your coat still on. Here's the fact the card was up against. After midnight, most of this country is a childcare desert. Licensed care for the hours when hospitals, warehouses, and diners actually run barely exists at any price, which means a parent on an overnight shift is choosing, every single night, between the paycheck and the child asleep across town. Ruth's table did not fix the country. It fixed 340 buildings. When the board asked Gideon how he justified the expense, he told them he was no longer in the business of justifying the cost of people, and that anyone who found that unsatisfying was welcome to go run a company, built out of something other than people, and report back. Whitney came around slower than the money did, but she came, and she came honestly. She started riding out to stores at hours that horrified her calendar. She sat on a stool in Akron at 3 in the morning and let a night cook named Marisol teach her how to read the rush that rolls in when the bars let out. And she wrote the name Marisol in her phone first name, only the first such name she had ever written down. And she could not have explained to anyone why her chest did the thing it did when she typed it. She was not cruel, and she never had been. She'd only ever needed a reason to look down. And now she had a father who kept handing her reasons, and a program named for a grandmother she had been told almost nothing about, and she went and found out about her, and that is a different story, and it also matters. Des built the program from the only blueprint that has ever worked, which is the inside of the problem. They made her the first field lead for Ruth's table, and she earned the title the way she had earned everything, by counting. She taught herself the company's systems off library tutorials watched on her phone at the bus stop, the same way she had once taught Junie her letters off index cards. She walked into stores at 2 in the morning, in cities she had never seen, and the night crews could tell inside of 5 minutes that this one was not a consultant. This one had scraped the grill. This one knew which questions to ask because she had been too proud to be asked them herself. She found money the spreadsheets had lost, and dignity the spreadsheets had never counted. Within the year, she was earning a salary with no hourly line on it, paid for work nobody had given her and nobody could take away. She moved the kids to a 2-bedroom off Shaker Square, $1,180 a month, with afternoon light that came through the kitchen window at an angle she noticed the first day, and chose the apartment for. Junie had a room of her own for the first time in her life. She stood in the doorway of it on moving day for a long minute, a child being handed something she had not asked for and did not yet know how to hold. And then she went in and lay down on the bed and slept 11 hours without moving, and woke up 9 years old instead of 40. And the first of every month, an envelope with no name on it went into the benevolence box at Greater Calvary Baptist on Kinsman, the same quiet fund that had kept the lights on at the Boone house the winter after Verla's funeral. Sister Pier Lane knew exactly who it was from. Sister Pier Lane knew everything. She folded the knowledge away with sharp corners, like foil, and said nothing, and set an extra plate at Des's new table on Sundays, where Othan now held court weekly on the subjects of weather, the Cavaliers, and the proper seasoning of greens, all 3 of which he considered crises of leadership. A year after the blizzard, the snow came down sideways on a Tuesday again, and somewhere on the west side an old man with no fare and no plan pushed into a Thorn diner in Lakewood 20 minutes before close. The night manager was 22 years old. He did not hesitate, and he did not have to be brave, because there was a laminated card by the time clock that said he did not, and a fund behind it that meant the coat off his back would not cost his own family a thing. He fed the man. He called him a cab on the company's dime and logged it under the line. The card told him to log it under. Des read the incident report 2 days later at a desk with her name on it, and she did not forward it to anyone, and she did not put it in the newsletter. She copied it by hand into a spiral notebook she kept now, into a column, in handwriting that had learned its carefulness from a 9-year-old. The card by those 340 time clocks had one more thing printed on it, at the bottom, below the phone numbers and the promises. A single sentence, no attribution. A full plate doesn't ask for a name. Truckers read it at 4 in the morning. New hires read it with their visors still in their hands. Not one of them knew it had come up out of Greenville, Mississippi in 1951, in the pocket of a dead man's coat, and that was exactly how Elam Boone would have wanted it. Gideon Thorne still came to the Belmont. He sat at the counter now, not the booth, because the booth was for watching and the counter was for belonging. He knew the whole overnight crew by name and the dishwasher's daughter name, and which nights Priya came in off shift for her 2 eggs over hard. On what would have been his mother's birthday, he tied on an apron at the Larchmere store and bussed tables from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, badly, while the crew pretended not to coach him, and at the end of it he tipped out like a stranger and drove home with his hands smelling like coffee and bleach, and did not wash them right away. In the new apartment, on the shelf by the kitchen window where the afternoon light landed, sat one object, alone, in the place of honor. A brass harmonica, dented on one corner, initials scratched by a boy's hand 70 years gone. It was the first thing Des had unpacked. One evening, Theo, 7 now, steady, his numbers good, his pockets full of bottle caps, climbed on a chair the way children climb on chairs, and took it down, and turned it over, and put it to his mouth the way he had seen nobody do, because everybody who had ever played it was gone before he came. He blew. One note came out, ragged and bright. The first note that harmonica had made since a man sat on a back step in Mount Pleasant refusing to say out loud what had been taken from him. The sound went up through 4 generations and came out the other side still warm. Des did not clap. She did not praise him, and she did not reach for her phone. She turned from the sink, and she listened, and she let it be exactly as ordinary and as enormous as it was. Theo lowered the harmonica, considered it, and hummed the note back at it, checking its work. Then he put it in his pocket and went to find his bottle caps, and his mother stood in the light with her hands dripping, in an apartment paid for with nobody's check. And the thing she felt was not relief, and it was not grief. It was the sound a house makes when everyone is inside it and nothing, for once, is wrong. Kindness does not keep your schedule. It does not arrive on the day you need it, in the amount you were short, in the form you would have requested if anybody had thought to ask you. But it keeps its word. It came up out of Mississippi in a coat pocket. It fed laid-off men off a folding table in a backyard the banks had redlined. It walked a $10 bill to a courtesy counter and pressed $83 into a stranger's cold hands in a blizzard. And it sat unnoticed in a corner booth for 30 years inside a rich man's homesickness, waiting for him to look down. Nothing was wasted. It only looked wasted for a while, the way seed looks wasted in winter. Des Boone gave away her son's medicine money on a wage that could not afford the medicine. On a night she believed no one was watching. Somebody was, not to test her. Nobody was testing anybody. A man had simply spent 30 years not watching, and one night, by accident, in a storm, he finally did, and it cost him everything comfortable he believed about why people are good, and it bought him back his mother. The cruelest thing about the Des Boones of this country is not what they survive. It is how smoothly the rest of us learn to look past them. Somebody cooked what you ate today. Somebody cleaned the floor you crossed. Somebody is awake right now, on a ghost shift in your city, holding a family together with 2 hands and a notebook, and you have walked past her, and so have I. So here is the only question that matters tonight, and I want you to answer it honestly, where nobody can hear you. When the snow is coming down sideways and somebody is standing in the doorway with nowhere left to go, which one are you? The one in the warm booth looking at the menu, or the one who kneels down in the slush to tie a stranger's shoe? Don't answer too fast. These stories are not really stories. They are mirrors, and this one is going to sit with some of you for a while. Tell me in the comments which one you have been, and which one you are trying to become. I read them. All of them. If this story moves something in you, do one small thing with it. Subscribe, so the next one knows where to find you. And send this to the person who showed up for you when nobody else did. The one who watched your kids, who left the plate, who drove the bus, who never once made you ask. Send it to them and tell them you noticed. They've been waiting longer than you think. The names in the story are invented. The diner is invented, the company is invented, and any resemblance to real people or businesses is coincidence. But the arithmetic is real. The waiting periods are real. The mother counting units at a refrigerator at 10 o'clock tonight is real, and she lives closer to you than you think. I wrote this one for her, and for a man who played the harmonica on a back porch in a city that broke its promises to him, because I am tired of how easily we all walk past, and I suspect, since you stayed to the end, that you are tired of it too. Thank you for spending tonight with me. I will see you in the next one.